Haven't gotten a notice yet about whether we're live.
Facebook is giving me a hard time. Just give me a
Okay, yeah, just let us know. All right, looks like we're doing our Facebook Live now. Huh. Um, all right, well, I think I'm just going to start. Hello, everyone. I'm RG Earnest with Legal Aid of Arkansas's Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. And I'm here with Tom Toft with Legal Aid of Western Michigan. Today, Tom and I are going to talk about what you can do if you claim a dependent on your tax return and someone else has, like an ex-spouse, like an ex-husband, ex-wife, has already claimed that dependent and they've done so improperly. When this happens, the taxpayer who is entitled to these dependent related refunds, like the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit, can be denied those refunds by the IRS, even though they're entitled to them. So the parent who is supposed to receive that much needed money from the government doesn't get it. And so, since our tax season is upon us, Tom and I want to help everyone watching out there to how to prepare for what you can do to prevent this issue and what to do whenever that issue arises. And now I'm going to hand it over to Tom.
Great. Next slide, please. Just wanted to mention quickly that this is not legal advice. So, nothing in this presentation is going to be formal legal advice, just general information. And I want to start off by mentioning that, every year, lots of dependents are fraudulently claimed on returns. Claiming a dependent and the related tax credits on a return can cause big benefits, such as like head of household filing status. You get more of a standard deduction, less taxable income. Claiming a dependent and those related credits, one of those is the child tax credit. And you can get a larger earned income credit by claiming dependents too. But with those big benefits, there's also an incentive for people to wrongfully claim dependents on tax returns. Now, sometimes it's fraud committed by an unknown person who uses the dependent Social Security number to claim a refund. But unfortunately, other times, excuse me, a relative, a foster care provider, a former boyfriend, or spouse claims the dependent and wrongfully receives a refund. And I got to note that the indications are that it is kind of a pickup in the number of these people that that are doing it. There's a lot more people in taxpayers' circle, family and friends, that have been wrongfully claiming dependents lately. Next slide, please. So this is a problem if someone claims you're dependent, because e-filing is blocked if someone already claimed your dependent. And electronic filing, or e-filing, that's the process of submitting tax returns via the internet. That's what most people do nowadays. When you go to file your returns electronically, and the reason people do this is they want to get the return to the IRS quickly, allow the IRS to process it, and hopefully get that refund coming back faster. But you see, for any tax years before 2024, and this filing season we're going into is for the 2024 tax year. So for any years before 2024, you can't e-file at all if your dependent was already claimed by somebody else. Now, this year there's a new rule, and so for the 2024 tax year, you can't e-file if your dependent was claimed by someone else unless you, the taxpayer, unless you, the first person listed on the return, known as the primary taxpayer, if you have what's called an IP PIN that you provide when e-filing, well, that will let your return go through and electronically be processed. So this coming filing season, even if someone claimed a dependent wrongfully, if you go in to file your return and you're the primary taxpayer, the first on the return, and you have what's called an IP PIN, then the IRS is going to let your return go through and be e-filed. That's a change from previous years, so it's a little bit of an improvement. And if any taxpayer is listed second on your return, that's called a secondary taxpayer. Or if any of your dependents on your return are there, you don't need to provide an IP PIN for them if they don't have one. So if you go into file, you have an IP PIN, you give it to the tax preparer. You know, if there's a second person on your return, the dependents, if they don't have IP PINs, you don't have to give it. And then hopefully that return would still go through. But if you don't have an IP PIN, and then you go in to e-file and someone's already claimed your dependent, that's going to be blocked. And you may be wondering what an IP PIN is. Well, an IP PIN is a 6-digit number assigned by the IRS that prevents someone else from filing a federal tax return using a taxpayer's Social Security number or individual taxpayer identification number. So when I'm talking about IP PIN, it's a special kind of protection PIN number that people can get from the IRS. All right, next slide, please. So if your e-filing is rejected because a dependent was already claimed by someone else, the IRS system is going to return a message that the dependent has already been claimed. So if you're doing it through tax software, you're going to get a message coming back saying, hey, someone's already claimed your dependent. If you're dealing with a professional tax preparer, they'll be using software to send the return to the IRS, and they should be able to tell you if the e-filing was rejected. So a message will come back letting you or your tax preparer know that the e-filing didn't go through because the dependent was already claimed. If that happens, a lot of folks wonder, like, who claimed that? There's not really a good way to find out because due to privacy laws, the IRS cannot tell you who claimed your dependent. So don't ask the IRS. Every year, people call the IRS, want to know, they get a little bit frustrated because the IRS has all these privacy laws and they're not going to tell you. So let's say you've tried to e-file, you're not able to, someone claimed your dependent, you get that message come back saying it's failed. Well, on the following slides, we're going to discuss the extra steps you need to take if your e-filing was rejected because someone already claimed your dependent. Unfortunately, there's going to be a little bit of extra work and burden on you to get your return in and try to get all the money that's owed to you. Next slide, please. So first, double check your return. If someone else already claimed your dependent, double check that you meet requirements to claim the dependent. And we've got 3 points here where you can get information that's publicly available to help you determine if you're able to claim that dependent. This first point here is a link to what's called the IRS Interactive Tax Assistant. That's where you can go to this website, and it's an IRS tool where you put in specific information about income, familial status, relationships, things like that. It'll tell you if you can claim someone as a dependent. There's also an IRS publication 501, which has lots of detailed information about whether you can claim someone as a dependent. And it's always a good idea to check the instructions to Form 1040 because it has a section called Who Qualifies as Your Dependent. And we have the links here where you can find that information online. Now, if you learn that you don't meet the requirements to claim the dependent, you can update your tax return and e-file it without the dependent. That's a possibility. But here, let me hand it over to you, RG.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. Would you say that as a general rule, Tom, would you say that it's better to if you can choose, would you say that it's better to e-file than to paper file your tax return?
It's always better to e-file if you can do it. is always better.
In one strategy that I suppose if you are in a position where you think that there may be someone, say like an ex-spouse, who is going to try to claim, say, a child as a dependent when they're not supposed to, would it be best to just try to get your return e-filed as soon as you possibly can?
Well, generally, that's a good idea because how the IRS system traditionally works when there's e-filings is kind of a race of who can get the return into the IRS system with that dependent claimed. So if you're able to get your return prepared and e-filed quickly, that means you're first in the race. Your return will get into the IRS system to be processed. And then if someone else is going to try and e-file and claim a dependent that's already on the return you did, they're going to have an IP pin for 2024 to kind of get through that. Otherwise, what will happen is, and this is likely what's going to happen, if there's a scammer, someone that's not supposed to be claiming the dependent, you've e-filed and they try to file after you, they're probably going to get a rejection from the e-filing. And in my experience, most of the time, when someone that's not supposed to claim a dependent tries and the e-filing is rejected, most of the time they just give up.
Right. Okay, well, that good to know. So like Tom said, if you're in a situation where you you've looked to see if you qualify for the dependents and you decide that you do, your next step is, if you have to, you don't have an IP pin, or your return's been rejected, you can file a paper return. And that's if someone has already claimed your dependent, but you meet those requirements of that dependent. So at that point, once you file that paper return, the IRS is going to investigate or examine, the two different returns that are each claiming that dependent, and they're going to try to determine who the proper claimant is for that dependent based on their examination. One of the worst mistakes that you can make if you believe that you are entitled to claim someone as a dependent is to just remove that dependent from the return and file the return, or e-file the return without the dependent. And the reason why is because you're entitled to claim that person. And then you have a return that you filed with the IRS suggesting that you're not. Um, so like Tom had mentioned, one of the things that has changed now is the existence of this IP pin. And so you can possibly avoid having to get to this point, um, and get money in hand if you have your IP pin. And what that does, as Tom explained, is it allows the tax return to go through to where you can still get your refund, and the IRS might still examine your tax returns to confirm that you are entitled to that dependent, but you don't necessarily have to wait, to get that refund. So here are some tips. If you file, your IRS return, by paper, uh, general rule, always use the United States Postal Service, and you want to be able to prove that you've actually filed it. And so you can use certified mail and return receipt requested. It's a little bit extra money, but it is well worth it. There are alternatives to filing with the USPS, but generally, if you can, file or mail your return with the USPS. Um, on your tax return, since you know that there's a dispute or a disagreement about the dependent, go ahead and put a cover letter with your tax return explaining the situation and including evidence that you are the rightful claimant with respect to that dependent. Also, depending on what's going on with the rejection on your return, it may be a good good thing to include what's called an identity theft affidavit. If you think someone has claimed your this dependent and it is the result of identity theft, you can file this form with the IRS, alerting the IRS to that so that the IRS investigates it that way as an identity theft issue. And finally, keep copies of everything. So one of the things that you're going to need to do, of course, when you file your return, or by paper, is you need to make sure that you have everything that you need to to support your position that you are entitled to this dependent. And so if you pull up off of the IRS site, you can pull up IRS form 886-H-DEP. And this is a really helpful tool that shows taxpayers what they need to show in different situations to prove that they really are entitled to claim that dependent. And so if you look at the documents that it requests, those documents are going to go to the relationship that you have with that dependent's residency, and how much support that dependent receives from you. Some of the documentation that you might use to prove that includes birth certificates, school and medical records, divorce decrees, leases, utility bills, things of that nature. And so on this next slide that I've just put up, what that shows you is basically just a copy of that form so that whenever you get on the IRS site, you will be able to recognize it. It's written in pretty easily to understand language, and it gives you really good direction of what you need to do. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to Tom to talk to us a little bit about what you can expect after you've filed that paper return and the IRS is examining to see who's rightfully entitled to claim that dependent.
So I would like to say first that, you may file electronically when the IEP payment goes through, great. But if you've got this whole situation that RG just talked about, we got to mail in by paper. Well, the IRS is going to have to figure out who's entitled to claim the dependent. And that's the reason on those previous slides, sending some extra information is going to be helpful for letting the IRS figure that out. They might get what you've sent and they just agree with you. It's pretty obvious. And then you get a refund, nothing else you have to do. But once you mail your paper return, you might get various notices from the IRS, and it's very important that you don't ignore IRS letters or notices. If you get something from the IRS, read everything they send you, any letters, notices, and if needed, respond by any deadline. So if you get something from the IRS, don't ignore it, and pay special attention if there's deadlines. Because in the situation where if you had to mail in a paper return because someone else already claimed your dependent, there's a couple of common notices I wanted to mention that you might get. One is a notice CP87A. And this is sent because someone else claimed your dependent, and it's going to include the last 4 digits of the dependent's social number, so you have an idea of which dependent it is. And the letter is going to tell you that if you're entitled to claim your dependent, you don't need to respond to the notice. If you made a mistake and are ineligible to claim the dependent, they want you to file an amended tax return. The other taxpayers can get the same notice. What this is, it's the IRS sending a letter saying, we haven't really decided yet who's going to get to claim the dependent. We want you taxpayers. They're going to send a letter to each return, whoever filed them. They're going to send a letter to each of those taxpayers. They're going to say, hey, double check everything. And if you made a mistake, amend it. So they're kind of hoping that the taxpayers will fix the situation themselves. Like one person made a mistake, and they go, oh, I accidentally claimed the dependent, I'll take it off. Problem solved at the IRS's end. Now they have just one return of the dependent. Makes it a little bit less a burden on them. Something that's very important to pay attention to is if you get a notice CP75A. A lot of these go out. The IRS sends this Well, they're auditing your return and they need more information to verify their earned income credit, your dependents, and the filing status that you claimed. If you don't respond to a CP 75A or can't provide the requested information, the IRS will not allow the audited items, just talking, earned income credit, child tax credit, household status. They're going to send you an exam report showing proposed changes to your tax return. So this is where they want you to prove that you're entitled to the filing status and to all the child-related credits that are on the return. Now, hopefully, when you mailed in your paper return, as RG suggested earlier, you sent enough information in that you won't get to this point of getting a CP75A. Hopefully, they're going to have what they need and they're going to be satisfied. But what you sent, it might not satisfy what they're looking for. They might want more. And if you get one of these notices, CP75A, just do not ignore it. Every year, I got folks that get this notice in the mail. They don't do anything about it. There's a deadline in it. They come to me a couple months after the deadline because now the IRS has denied credits and status and adjusted their return, and they get less refund or sometimes even owe. It's always best to read what you get from the IRS, respond within the deadlines, and of course, if you're looking at an IRS letter and you're like, what the heck does this mean? What do I need to do? Reach out to your local low-income taxpayer clinic. Because sometimes in these notices, they can be a little vague in what they want, and there's kind of a certain knowledge of what the IRS is looking for, and it can be very helpful to talk to a professional tax practitioner such as RG if you're in his neck of the woods, or if you're in West Michigan talking to myself. And I find that the chances of providing what the IRS needs and getting a refund goes way up if you got a professional helping you. Do you have anything to add, RG?
No, that's excellent, Tom. One thing, I guess I do. Do you think, will the notices be the same if you have a situation where someone does have an IP pin and there is a disagreement about, well, say that someone has already filed and claimed the dependent, and then taxpayer comes in and they have their IP pin and they also claim the dependent. You still have a discrepancy there between two filed returns, and each is claiming the same dependent. I'm assuming the IRS is still going to send notices. Do you agree with that?
I am unaware of the specifics of this new IP pin rule. If they can't figure it out, the IRS can't figure it out at their end, my guess is they're going to send out some notices, right? And they're just going to use the same ones they usually do. Sometimes when I've talked to agents, it's been really, they've got, sometimes they'll have a dependent claim and they'll know that the first person that's wrongfully claiming the dependent is not related. It's from someplace far away, and just it looks really scammy, and the IRS knows that. And then a paper return comes in from a taxpayer who is supposed to claim it, and they've sent like a copy of their birth certificate and maybe some school records showing the child lived there, just some good documentation. Sometimes the IRS just makes a call, and it's that obvious. But sometimes it's a closer case, and I've got a feeling with an uptick in friends and family members claiming dependents wrongfully, that there's probably going to be more of these that the IRS is going to have a harder call, because if you've got a guy in a situation where a father of a client was wrongfully claiming the client's kids, well, when IRS looks at it, a father could meet the relationship requirement and all the rules. It's a little bit harder for them to figure that one out than it is if it's Joe Blow 3 states away that filed. So I would expect that you would still see these same types of letters, but we'll find out this year.
Right. Well, I think that's all of our presentation for today. I want to thank everyone from joining us, and thank you, Tom, and Legal Aid of Western Michigan. Tom is the one who prepared these great slides for us. They're very informative. Our contact information is here on this last slide, and so if you're more in the northern Midwest area, get in touch with Tom. If you're further south, you can certainly get in touch with me at Legal Aid of Arkansas. So with that, I wish everyone the best in this upcoming filing season, and thanks again, Tom, for everything.
Oh, it was a pleasure. You have a good day.
You too. Thank you.